morning, everybody. My name is Fatemeh Riahi, and I come to you today to talk to you about the idea of a single story. So now I know that you guys might not be familiar with this concept, but for just one moment, give me the time, and I'll explain it to you throughout my talk. No, and now I want everybody to stand up. Up to me. All right, so I want you to think about one thing. Have any of you ever felt judged at any point in your life? If anyone has not, please sit down. So you guys haven't felt judged in your lives?
I have.
You have? Okay.
Oh,
we're supposed to stand up.
I apologize.
Good. All right, now you can take a seat.
Okay.
Sorry if that was a little bit confusing, but I wanted you guys to sit down because if you ever did not feel judged, I would definitely want to be in your shoes. So I saw, everybody stood up, and I think that really makes a point. Every single person in this room has felt judged at some point in their lives, and I think that that's a problem in our society today. Why do we feel the need? As you said earlier, we have that internal negative self-talk, but why do we feel the need to put others down and have a single mindset? Why does that perpetuate? So today I aim to maybe explain that a bit. So the idea of a single story is having one story, only one perception of a people, a person. So I'd like to take you back a few years. As a child in my family, we moved around a lot, quite a bit. We only stayed in one place for 2 years. And I remember moving from the Caribbean all the way back to Canada. So I was always the new kid, and I guess I got used to that at some point. I don't know when. But I walked into the classroom, and the teacher told me to stand up in front of the class, and I did, to introduce myself. So I did. And all the students were like, oh wow, she's from the Caribbean. I heard little whispers and things off to the side. And I stood up and I said, hi, my name is Fatemeh Riahi, and I just moved here from the Caribbean, and I saw everyone's reactions. Their eyes were wide open, just absolute silence throughout the room. So in that moment I realized, these kids, they don't see anything else besides the pop culture that perpetuates throughout their lives. They only see the news, and they have this preconception of the Caribbean. Like, they were asking me, where are your dreadlocks? Where are your flip-flops? I don't get it. So at that moment I realized that, they had this single story of me in their minds before. There's a quote by Chimamanda Adichie. She's a Nigerian author. She said, show people as one thing, as only one thing, and that is what they become. So I think that quote really shows everything about the single story. If you have this conception of a person in your mind, you don't see the whole story, you just see one aspect of it. So when I was standing up in front of that classroom, I realized that, I'm so grateful that I moved around every 2 years, every 5 years. Even though I did not have a single home life, I saw all these different cultures and all these different people. So I'm really glad that, I had that opportunity. So I must admit that I am guilty of this single story as well. I remember moving to Nebraska, and I had never heard of Nebraska. I thought it was a desolate wasteland of corn and farmers, and I had no idea. So when I went there, I came into Omaha, and like, what? I was just completely taken aback by all the buildings, all the people, so I'm guilty of this too. So I think it's impossible to talk about this single story without talking about power. There's a Persian word called behtat, which signifies the idea of that you are greater than another. So when you have, running on the principle of behtat, when you have that one idea, when you have that power, you can say how the story is told, who tells the story, when the story is told, and how many are told. Power is the ability to not only tell the story, but to make the story the definitive story of that person. You make that one story define who they are. I was sitting in a classroom, in my English classroom. We read this book called 3 Cups of Tea by Greg Mortensen. It's about women in Afghanistan and their lives and all the trials and tribulations they went through. And one girl, she, right after we had our discussion, she said, it's such a shame that Middle Eastern women are so, oppressed. Why don't they do anything about it? So I sat there at my desk, being an old Middle Eastern Iranian girl, and I was just like, okay, hold your tongue. And I did not hold my tongue. I read the book called, I told her I recently read a book called American Psycho. And I said that it's such a shame that young Americans are all serial killers. And I know I said that in a fit of mild irritation, but again, I admit to, seeing her as that one, I thought she was ignorant. I thought, oh, she's ridiculous. So that single story I had of her in my mind really influenced my comment. So again, we had talked about, I approached her later and I said, I'm sorry for coming off across that way, but, I just went on and I told her about the single story and where I was from, and now we're actually best friends, so at least one positive came out of that. So one thing that I'd like for you guys to take away today, I'd just like to commend you for being here. Taking an executive speaking course and seeing all of your experiences really has taught me a lot. So I'd like you guys to take it one step further. Be proactive and see not just that single story, not what you see on the news screen in the newspaper. I invite you to read a book, talk to someone, really experience their culture so you don't experience that single story, but you experience all the different ones that you might not see every day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.